Hello. Today I'm going to do a poem where the mind is without fear. This is written by one of India's most renowned poets, Rabindranath Tagore. Now, Rabindranath Tagore wrote this poem in 1910, and he was a Bengali poet who initially wrote it in Bengali, and then he himself translated the poem into English. He wrote essays, poems, stories, songs, dramas, and even novels. This poem, Where the Mind is Without Fear, was one of the poems in his book, the Gitanjali. He was knighted by the British, and he was the first Indian to win the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913. In this poem, Rabindranath Tagore has a utopian hope for India. What is the meaning of utopian? Utopian means a perfect state. And so you will see in this poem that Rabindranath Tagore wanted India to be the perfect country. Now let me give you the background of this poem a little bit. This poem is set when India was under the British rule. What was the state in India? India was under the British rule, and so the Indians were oppressed, were suppressed. What were the thought processes of the Indians? They were superstitious, there was prejudice, there was narrow-minded thinking. It was not progressive. And there were a lot of things going on in India which did not look like India would progress very much because of the traditions that the Indians followed. And so Rabindranath Tagore, being this scholar, he saw India being the place which was void of all prejudices and superstitions and was a place of progress and development. Rabindranath Tagore was called the Bard of Bengal. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come out of the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habits, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. I am now going to do a line-by-line explanation of this poem. The first line, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. The poet wants his India to be an India where the people are not bogged down by fear. He wants the people of India to hold their head high, to have dignity in who and what they are. In those days, the people of India were oppressed by the British rule and always walked with their head in submission to the British. And Rabindranath's thought is, let the Indian be one whose head can be held high with dignity. Where knowledge is free. The caste system in India did not allow every caste to get itself education. And so Rabindranath Tagore wants that every caste, every person, whether rich or poor, whether Brahmin or Kshatriya, should be given the opportunity of education, because in education there is progressive thinking. Where the world has not been broken up into fragments, and the political scenario in the world at that time were the strong nations of the world moving around the world, colonizing it. And so there was a discrimination between countries, the rulers and the ruled. And so the poet says, he wants a world that is not broken into fragments. He wants a united world. By narrow domestic walls, and very often the cause of disunity is our narrow-minded thinking, domestic, because that thinking is encouraged or is trained in the home. Walls standing for barriers between people. So when you look at narrow domestic walls, it is the narrow-minded thinking that has been encouraged or inculcated within the home, which keeps one person away from another. Where words come out of the depth of truth. And the poet says, when we think narrowly, superstitiously, we are not thinking scientifically. And there is no truth in superstitions. It is rather science that takes us forward. Where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection. Here we have a personification, where striving or the desire to achieve is stretching its arms like a human. And what is that striving wanting? It is wanting perfection. Personification is when a non-living thing is given the human quality of having life as well as intelligence. And so this line is a personification. Where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way. Now Rabindranath has picked very, very specific words when he uses this metaphor of the stream of reason. Now when we think of a stream is a water body where water is constantly moving. And so he uses this metaphor of stream of reason because he doesn't want our reason to be limited to only one situation, but he wants our reason and our logic to flow like a stream, to be constant. Into a dreary desert sand of dead habits. And what are we Indians doing? At that point of time in India, the people were stuck in their narrow-minded thought processes, in their narrow-minded ways of dealing with one another, in the rituals and the traditions that were sometimes not very fair. And Rabindranath Tagore says, let us not be stuck with those habits, especially if those habits are bad habits. Let us move on. So when you look at a desert is a place where there is not much life. And so the poet says, when we are superstitious, we are like that dreary desert because our habits are encouraging us to be barren and arid and without progressiveness. In the line, dreary desert of dead habit, we have a figure of speech called alliteration, where the starting letter of three words, dreary, desert of dead, are beginning with the letter D. Into ever-widening thought and action. Here the poet is asking us to widen our thoughts, to be bigger in our thoughts, act in a way where we show that our thought processes are bigger and better. Into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Here Rabindranath Tagore is praying to God. He's asking God, please, when we get our freedom, let this freedom not be narrow. Let this freedom be broad. Let it be all-encompassing. Let it not only be political, but let it be intellectual, as well as emotional, as well as spiritual. And he hopes that when India gets its freedom, India not only gets its freedom from the British, but India gets its freedom from all the things that have held us down, because our thought processes have been advanced, enlightened, and dynamic. I want to add to this for the students of English. Instead of using one singular word over and over and over again in your answer, I want to give you some synonyms of words. And so I'm giving you a list of synonyms. For example, if we talk of divisive, something that divides us, there is alienating that you can use, estranging, separating, isolating. These words can be used instead of using the word divisive. Let me do the second word, prejudice. Prejudice can be bigoted or unfounded opinion, or a bias, or being judgmental, or discriminatory, or intolerant and opinionated. Use different words while writing your answers, because your answers in English just become better. If you did like this poem and explanation, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.